Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, both sides of the Brexit debate have made claims about the impropriety of the other side's campaign during the referendum. And this has sometimes tipped over into accusations of illegality, which then become of concern to the Electoral Commission, which is the independent body responsible for overseeing elections and referendums in the UK and also regulates political finance. And it's certainly been in the headlines recently. Just yesterday, the Commission fined the left-wing activist group Momentum over £16,000 for multiple breaches of electoral law connected to the 2017 general election and a failure to report donations. And in November last year, the body referred the major Brexit supporter Aaron Banks to the National Crime Agency over alleged illegal funding of the anti-EU campaign during the referendum. The Electoral Commission says it must update the rules around digital campaigning before any second EU referendum, if there is to be one. So how can we better regulate elections and referendums in future? Joining me to discuss that are Anoush Chakelian, who is the senior writer at the New Statesman, Darren Hughes, Chief Executive of the Electoral Reform Society, and Alan Renwick, Deputy Director of the Constitution Unit at the University College London. Welcome to you all. Anoush, can I start with you? I mean, we heard there about steps which the Electoral Commission has taken. Does it have the weapons, the power, the expertise to ensure that we have fair elections in this country?
Absolutely not. I mean, the reason why all of these campaign groups and political parties are constantly falling foul of the rules is because they just cannot regulate modern campaigning. I mean, they're operating under the Political Parties Elections and Referendums Act, which came in 2000. Facebook and Twitter only came in for public use in 2006. So really, these are really outdated in terms of online campaigning. And at the same time, there's this arbitrary separation between the Electoral Commission regulating national spending and then local police forces regulating local constituency campaign spending for individual candidates, which is utterly arbitrary because our general elections depend on a few marginal seats.
I mean, you know, elections are fairly rough old things. Does it really matter if there's a bit of misbehaviour here and there?
Well, I think it's hugely important. It matters both for the integrity of the process in itself and ensuring that we have a process that is robust democratically, but it also matters for confidence in the process. And we can see that public confidence in politics, in campaigning, in elections is at rock bottom in the UK at the moment. And we really need action to address that.
Put it in its crudest, do you think elections are being stolen because of failure to supervise?
Well, we don't know that, but there's a danger of it. And so long as there is that danger, we ought to be concerned about it and we ought to take measures to address it. And, you know, we should be acting against the kind of misinformation that we see in British politics. We should be trying to deal with that. But we should also have a positive vision for our democracy. We should be trying to improve the quality of our democracy and improve the quality of really good information that's out there as well.
OK, Darren, here's electoral reform. What electoral reforms do we need to ensure that they work better?
Well, I think it does feel a little bit like the Wild West out there at the moment, because as we've heard, the last laws were written sort of towards the end of the 90s. Now we're well into the 21st century, and it's just not kept up. So I think there are just things that we could transfer from our current system to the new system, so that when you see a digital ad, it tells you the same sort of information you'd get if it came through your front door, which is a highly regulated behaviour, but yet online people can do what they like, and you don't know who's paying for the advertising. So we need to change those sorts of things as well, so that people do have more confidence in what they're reading, and they can make a judgment about it. I think that's the problem at the moment. You know, politics is claim, counterclaim, judgment, and what we're missing at the moment is the chance to really know what's going on.
Is digital the main problem that needs dealing with?
Yeah, at the moment it's one of the main problems because you don't know where your content is coming from. So the reason why, you know, lots of different parties and campaign groups don't make that much political hay out of their opponents falling foul of these rules is because they don't want too much scrutiny on themselves, because the rules about online advertising and content are so vague. The Electoral Commission has been calling for more detailed breakdowns of their parties' online activity for ages. At the moment it's just under that banner advertising, so vague. There's no online section. When you look at their receipts, you only see their receipts in the advertising section. There's no section specifically
for online. Is it a money
online
problem? Because it's much cheaper, isn't it, to do it online?
Yeah, I mean, I think Momentum only spent about £2,000 on their Facebook campaigning. campaigning over the last election, because there's all sorts of content that's free that comes from other organisations or individuals, and none of that is regulated. So there's the Jeremy Corbyn for Prime Minister Facebook group. You know, that's not regulated, and the content on there is pro-Labour, goes everywhere.
But I mean, for example, what could you do about the Jeremy Corbyn for Prime Minister group? How could you regulate it?
I'm not sure, actually. I mean, I think that's probably more in your area of expertise, but it's definitely one of these things that the Electoral Commission has no power to control.
I mean, it's a bit like this whole problem with political action committees in the United States. I mean, how could you regulate those?
Well, I think regulatory solutions are only part of the solution. So in part, you can try to regulate the transparency of who is putting out what messages to whom. But that's only going to address part of the problem. You need to improve digital literacy so people can understand better where messages are coming from and interpret those messages more effectively.
But you've got to see the messages, haven't you? And because by definition, this, as I understand it, if you're targeting messages on people on the internet, that is narrow casting rather than broadcasting, as it were. So,
exactly. And that would be one solution, would be to have a single database where all political advertising had to go, regardless of who it was sent to, so that people can look and see, OK, some people are being targeted in this way, they've been given certain sorts of information, we're in a campaign, we've got the right to try and counter that information. I mean, in the end, what voters do with their vote is up to them. But it does feel at the moment that there's a lot of manipulation going on that we wouldn't put up with if we were seeing it in broadcasting or on the doorstep. So it's a big change. It used to be who could raise the most money, and now these things to do are very, very cheap. So it's not about the spend, it's about the behaviour.
You can also micro-target Facebook advertising or other kinds of online advertising to specific areas, and so that means that breaches the national-local divide that divides the Electoral Commission from the police forces
which
that
is
have to
the problem
regulate
they ran
locally,
into in
which is
Thanet
a huge
and
problem.
elsewhere.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, do you think it makes sense, this idea of having local limits and national limits, bearing in mind, you know, for example, Sky's a national broadcaster, so is the BBC. I mean, you know, people have been caught out on spending limits, but you know, winning locally is part of a national campaign, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it clearly doesn't work anymore. I mean, it's clearly a system that was devised in the 19th century, and the nature of communications have transformed completely since that took place. So, I mean, that's the kind of area where a really detailed review is required, because it's quite difficult to work out exactly what the solution would be. Whereas the sorts of things that Darren is talking about in terms of having a repository of advertising, the idea of having imprints, digital imprints on adverts so everyone can see who has put stuff out, these are solutions that are kind of obvious, and I think everyone agrees that they ought to be introduced. And I think government actually also accepts that change is required.
Well, this was the big question. I mean, do you detect any political will to sort this out? Because, as you say, it's a Wild West which possibly benefits the rougher customers.
Well, it's a general problem in politics, is that they're the one industry that gets to regulate themselves completely, and so the people that are there like to keep the rules they've already got. And I think with our winner-takes-all system of politics, this is why this is even more important, because you've only got to win a handful of marginal seats and you can run the government of the country. So actually we do need political pressure from across all people who participate in politics, including the media, to try and make politicians act on this. Some of these things are very easy wins, and they really should move on them.
OK, thank you all very much indeed for coming in here and making that important point.